Okay. It started about 5 years ago. Brian approached me and said I should come and draw with him on his computer screen, and we just did some work on the computer at that stage. And then shortly afterwards he suggested that we painted on these offcuts from the nearby hardware store. And so we just we'd go down the road and start more and more of these paintings. And we've done way over 100 at this stage, and always I say we've upcycled the material, because they're offcuts which they're throwing away, and then we take them to the studio and paint on them. And then we decided to add sounds to the painting, because obviously he's a musician, and it was a really interesting kind of breakthrough, I think, to illustrate the pictures with sounds, and to actually create paintings, create sounds that the paintings had inspired. And I think the effects are very effective. Yeah, it seems to work very well in that you kind of brought into the paintings more by listening to the sounds that relate to them. So it's an interesting kind of combination of the two things. I mean, basically we had quite separate styles. The paintings that he's done are very, very hard-edged and mathematical and quite formal, and my paintings are much more expressionistic. And so the two very different styles came together, and we forged a new style, which is our style, as opposed to my work specifically or his work specifically. We've decided it's an ongoing collaboration. We're working on a major book together. We're going to be making prints together, and so it's a process that is more than just a once-off, and we work extremely well together. We have an immediate understanding of each other, and it just gels from there. Yeah. We're quite ruthless when it comes to editing our work, and so at one stage I've been but taking along the kind of lead from Banksy or Jean-Michel Basquiat, where they started as graffiti artists, and Basquiat is a good example, and then he goes on to putting his works onto canvases in galleries, and no one really commented on that transformation. So we then took the paintings that we didn't like and put them on the street. We'd leave them on the street. And then we went a step further, and because we're working in Notting Hill, where there's these big mansions, very empty big mansions, which probably are used by the people once a week or once a year or something, very briefly. And so we wrote on the backs of the paintings, of some of the paintings, we said, "This is to make you feel less lonely." And we went and put them on the doorstep of the mansions. So that was quite an unusual thing to have done. But that was a fun thing to have done, and also a kind of anti-market statement, if you know what I'm saying. Well, I was at art school 30 years ago in London at Byam Shaw, and I spent 2 years in the Life Room working from the model, so I had quite a traditional art background, which I was very glad about, because in fact just after we left they stopped working from the model, and it's now much more, as you know, conceptual. So I have a very clear foundation in that figurative artworks. South Africa, where I'm based in Cape Town. I use a lot of enamel paints, I use a lot of varnishes, this type of thing, with my oil paint. I use a very good Old Holland paints, and of course they're both oil-based. And so the house paints enabled me to spread more paint across the canvas, to be extravagant in a way that you couldn't normally be with very expensive oil paints, and it works very well together. So I'm very used to working with that material. I suppose I always said I always wanted to be a rock star, and the rock stars always wanted to be painters. So I worked with David Bowie a few years ago. We did a number of paintings together, and then more recently I worked with Dave Matthews in America. Okay, sure.